as you have really focused on accessibility and cultural responsiveness and trauma-informed services, what are some things to consider when offering culturally specific services for folks who are using substances?
You don't know a person's full background, and also recognize that you're treating an individual and that a person could be mutually exclusive of their community, of their culture, if you will, but they're also carry that culture with them. And so I like to say, err on the side of individuality, like err on this, proceed with caution. So just because, I'll give an example, like a personal example, I have an autistic son. And one of the things that you'll hear in the community is you meet one autistic person and you're meeting a completely new person and they're not like any other autistic person. And so maybe you're meeting someone of a specific culture or from a specific community, and you're it's hard, again, implicit bias, not to make some assumptions, and that's okay. But then take a step back, have a second thought about it and say, okay, maybe I'm just going to ask and not assume. And so when you are interacting with someone, and I'll again, I love giving examples from at least from our learning experiences. And so in DC, we have a high population of Ethiopian and Eritrean people. And one of the things that we know is that it's a very tight-knit, very close community, very close ties to their religious bodies, their churches, and oftentimes a lot of intervention occurs within the church. The other piece is when we're even getting interpretation services, we have to be very aware that perhaps this could be someone's cousin who's interpreting, right? Because the community is so small. But one of the things that's really important is not to assume that the survivor wants to be separated from their community. It's an assumption that we tend to make as Americans, that when you want to flee, you want to get as far away as possible. But that's not the case, right? And so when we talk about substance use, for instance, and the stigma of substance use, well, you're making an assumption that maybe a person is ashamed. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. You're making the assumption that this isn't a part of, or I can even say, even in Black communities, that there's this assumption that there's the expectation of substance use and that it's accepted, but maybe not. And so going into recognizing your implicit bias, recognizing that you're having a thought that you cannot confirm or deny, is the first step in breaking down your own barriers to providing quality care. And so that's really huge for us, really big for us, to whenever we start to see it and we start to see that language change, and when we're discussing how to best assist a client, it's like, okay, was that an assumption, or did this person tell you that? Did you hear that? And then it's okay to ask, what would be the best way to discuss this? Is it okay that I ask about this? Because that's the other part about being culturally responsive, is knowing that maybe a person isn't okay to talk about it. Maybe it is quite a faux pas to even discuss this, or to discuss this in front of, or, to admit that this has happened, or to label it abuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when we go on to substances, again, don't make the assumption. There could be shame, there could be stigma, or there could be acceptance. You don't know. What we want to do is take time to listen, take time to believe, and take time to trust. I have told the folks that I supervise, you know what? Someone could be literally looking at you and committing the lie as they're telling you the lie, but I still want you to believe. And the reason is that there's a reason that the person might be lying to you. right? That there's a reason that someone may be putting up a facade or maybe you haven't built trust with that person, or maybe they've had such a horrible experience the last time they told the truth about using, about their activities, about their survival, about their lived experience. And so the more you believe, the more your presentation is trusting and warm and accepting and not judgmental, the more likely you're going to be successful with helping that person. And so that's the approach. Again, easier said than done, but if you continue to remind and you make it a part of your brain space and making that a part of what center is for you, you become a very successful social worker for sure, or social services provider for sure.
Yes. And it reminds me of the difference between cultural competence and cultural humility, right? That it's really easy for our practice to devolve into stereotyping, but that when we remain really humble, really in tune with each person as their own ecosystem of culture, and when we show up in ways that are respectful, when we ask, and I love how you named even asking how someone would like to speak about this, right? That for some folks, maybe that they will prefer speaking with this one-on-one. And the idea of a group is like, I don't want to be anywhere near that group, right? And so really being able to have that transparency in our communication and that really guarding those assumptions.
Absolutely. And I think there's something to be said about a journey. It's a great illusion. I think it's a really great illusion that we don't really dissect or think about. My journey is so much different than your journey. And where I am in my journey is so much different than yours. And so we make the assumption that, again, let's use our CAC. We don't immediately say, oh, you use marijuana. Okay, well, thanks for letting us know that. Instead of just saying, okay, well, I'm going to set up a meeting with you. Because that's what we used to do. Immediately set up a meeting with the CAC instead of asking. Because maybe now that's an admittance of addiction. Well, that's part of the journey, is the acceptance, right? And if you don't honor that, and if you don't say or ask, is this something that you would like to get help with? Or is this something that you see as a problem? And I mean, it's asking those questions as opposed to assuming that it's a problem for this person, that maybe this person is like, I need this. I need this. If I will not survive this depression without it. Before you go diving deep into it, create that trust, create that conversation. That's not going to happen in the first 3 minutes, the first 3 hours, the first 3 days, even the first 3 weeks of getting to know that person. And I think that's the other thing, is we're such a data-driven society and we want results. Again, what is my success is not going to be someone else's success per se. Again, the journey, maybe walking a mile is tough. Maybe walking 10 feet is tough. Maybe you're an ultra runner and you won 100 miles in a week. You just don't know. And it's one of those things where when I hear that really great metaphor of a person's journey, I think sometimes we forget that journeys have lots of stops on the way. Sometimes you have to turn back. Sometimes you got to go get some gas. Sometimes you have to do a whole lot of things on that journey. That's why it's called a journey. There's a lot of adventure. There's lots of great things that happen on journeys, and there's a lot of bad things that happen on journey. I think if we don't honor that, and if we don't honor that someone's lived experience is uniquely theirs, then we tend to treat everyone like kind of, like a kind of assembly line where we have the same remedy for each person. And we know that that is, since the beginning of time, not effective. And you have to treat everyone. And this goes back to your original question of like, you're talking to an individual.
Absolutely. And so often we reach for these kind of simple answers, one size fits all, and that's just not the case. It's just not the reality.
No, it's not. I mean, nothing about that is real, even in your own life.